A key part of a classical education, most people know, is reading ancient pagan classics like Homer and Virgil and Cicero, which naturally raises the question for many Christians, why would we be reading these pagans? Why read these stories of idolatry that are often have a lot of obscenities in them? This was actually a concern that the church fathers had. This is not a new concern. Many of the church fathers wrestled long and hard over to what extent they should introduce young Christians to this pagan literature. Now, I think a number of the concerns they had are not so great nowadays because we're not tempted actually to go out and build an altar to Zeus, right? These idolatries are not live dangers in the modern world. We have our own idolatries. So for many of the church fathers, they were wary of introducing students to texts that had idolatries that were alive and well in their context. Nowadays, we can look at them with some more historical perspective and understand how those shaped the ancient world, how they shaped the context in which Christianity came. And of course, these stories are often full of bad characters doing bad things and sometimes with bad morals. But I think that shouldn't necessarily be a challenge to reading them. The Bible itself has plenty of stories of bad characters doing bad things, and we can learn from negative examples as well as from positive examples. But I think this leads to, some might say, okay, that's fine. I get that reading pagan literature is not automatically bad, but life is short and you can only read so much, and maybe we should focus on reading the Christian sources. Is this stuff really valuable enough for us to spend a lot of time on? Well, there's a lot of things to say here, but I think one thing to emphasize is that if we want to immerse ourselves in the riches of the Christian tradition, we need to recognize that most of the greatest texts of our tradition are themselves steeped in the pagan classics. Of course, Dante's Divine Comedy is a great example. You can't really understand that text unless you know Virgil, and you can't understand Virgil unless you know Homer. So if we want even to know our own Christian tradition well, we need to know the pagan tradition that informed it. But I think we also need to say that there are some things that, by God's grace, by the gifts of reason that God sheds on believers and unbelievers alike, there were many pagan authors that discovered real truths about how the world works. Euclid's Geometry or Aristotle's Four Causes give us insight into how things objectively are. And if we want to be good students of God's creation, we need to study these authors. Now, I think it's important to note that applies to contemporary pagan authors as well, contemporary unbelievers. We can't just say, oh, we'll read the ancient pagan classics, but we're going to hide ourselves away from reading any unbelievers in the current environment. I think it's important here at Loudon Classical School that we should be encouraging our students to seek wisdom wherever it may be found, and to have appreciation for the things that God's image bearers, whether ancient or modern, whether Christian or non-Christian, have discovered, and to be able to build on those discoveries themselves.